So the Bhagavad Gita, before I speak on it, it's a transcendental work, and I'd like to offer my respects to my spiritual teacher, whom I've been studying Bhagavad Gita under. So, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimate Sudaswarapananda, Paramahamsa Iti Namine. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Bhagavad Gita is a transcendental work. It's a really big. And for most people, when they have a look at Bhagavad Gita, it's kind of like, whoa, where do I start? So, Bhagavad Gita means Song of God, and it is spoken by the Supreme Person, Lord Krishna, 5,000 years ago. And he describes in the Bhagavad Gita that he spoke the Bhagavad Gita millions of years ago to the Sun God. And the way spiritual knowledge is handed down, it comes through what's called a disciplic succession. So, like I'm speaking and you hear, and whatever you understand and you pass on, and the people who understand and live by it, and they pass it on. So that's like a disciplic succession, of teacher to student. And so the disciplic succession that I come from is a disciplic succession starting with Lord Krishna speaking the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is declared by so many authorities, saintly people, and himself that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so it's not, Bhagavad Gita is not like an opinion, it's a conversation between Arjuna, who was a warrior, military guy, and Lord Krishna. And it was said in such a way that it was the heaviest possible situation that anybody could ever be in, and here's what you do, right? So that's kind of like what the Bhagavad Gita is about. It's like none of us can say, well, yeah, but my situation's different. It's like this is the heaviest situation anybody could have been in. And so there's different personalities spoken about in the Bhagavad Gita, and it was originally spoken in Sanskrit, and then it was recorded by Srila Vyasadeva, and he compiled the Vedic scriptures 5,000 years ago. So it was spoken, and he compiled them into writing. And when this conversation it was actually took place on a battlefield, and it took place, it was there was a king by the name Dhritarashtra, and he was blind from birth and blind spiritually speaking, and he had many sons, and one of them was called Duryodhana, and is mentioned often as the evil son of Dhritarashtra. And he had great ambitions for immense power. So there was a battle about to take place, and there'd been innumerable efforts made so that this battle didn't take place. It was between two different families. And what had happened was the king, Pandu, who was the ruler of the world at the time, this is 5,000 years ago, you don't read about it in the modern history books, but he was the ruler of the world, and he died at a young age, leaving 5 young children. And so his brother took over the throne until the children were old enough, the boys were old enough. The older son would then take over the throne. And Dhritarashtra was supposed to look after these 5 children, in the palace. And his eldest son, Duryodhana, was envious right from the beginning. It's like, I want this kingdom. I want the power, just like, everywhere you see in the world, right? I want power, and whatever power I've got is not enough. I want more power, I want more authority. And because of political arrangements and financial situations, many of the kings in the smaller kingdoms around the world got together and they sided with Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana in this battle that was about to take place. And so in the Pandavas, they were the saintly kings, and they were the rightful owners of the the heirs to the throne. They'd said, look, okay, we'll just take 5 villages, and it was like, no, we won't even give you enough land to place a pin on, right? and then we're going to exile you to the forest, and you're going to live in the forest for 14 years, and if anybody finds you, then we're going to make it another, they find you somewhere in the forest, and we're going to make it another 14 years. That was just this horrible, horrible scene, no compromise whatsoever. So it came to this point where, okay, it's going to be a war, right? And it's going to decide who takes the throne. And Arjuna was, even though he was a warrior, a military man, he was a very saintly person. And his relationship with Lord Krishna has been one of friendship. And so Krishna had agreed to be Arjuna's chariot driver. And the military code in that time was like, if someone challenged you to a fight, the ethical principles of a warrior was that you couldn't refuse, And so there was, a lot of different things going on, but also there was strict code of fighting. So the fighting started at a certain time in the day, and it finished at a certain time of the day. And in the evening, they could go to each other's camps and, converse and share meals and stuff like that, right? And there was code like you don't, same as now it's supposed to be, you don't shoot someone from the back and things like that. But so the Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. When Arjuna asked Krishna, please, I want to see who's so willing to fight in this, horrendous battle, like, how come all these people just, itching for a fight, And so he asked Krishna to drive the chariot between the two warring parties so he could see who was there. And he saw, all grades of relatives, because like a huge dynasty, So there was all his cousin brothers and his other brothers, and, military teachers was on the other side. There was his grandfather was on the other side because he'd been looked after financially, so he was obligated to be on the other side. So that, he just saw all these like huge numbers of soldiers and everybody that were willing to lay down their lives, and basically, it's like, I don't want to do this. This is just, this is just too horrible. And so Dhritarashtra, the blind king, asked his secretary, Sanjaya, what is happening? What's happening on this battle? And the Battle of Kurukshetra took place on a site of pilgrimage north of Delhi. And so, it was actually a holy place. And it was away from the public. There was nowhere near cities or anything. So it was just between the military. It's like it was proper in that sense. You don't get civilians involved. This is just between the armies. It should just stay between the armies. And Sanjaya was a disciple of Srila Vyasadeva, and he had the ability to be able to see what was going on without physically being there. And sometimes people think, well, how do you have that kind of mystic power? But, if you told, my grandmother, or great-grandmother, that, one day you're going to be able to talk on these things, or you're going to be able to see somebody while you're speaking, or, have a television or a movie and, it's going to be someone related, it'd be just like, it's crazy, right? How could that technology be there? So this is the technology, there's subtle technologies, mystic power type technologies from the ancient past that people knew. So Sanjaya was able to see what was going on and hear this conversation, this sacred conversation, and relay what was happening to the blind king, right? He was his secretary, and so he's relaying what is going on. And so, when everybody was, ready to fight, and they all started, they blew their conch shells and kettle drums, and made this like uproarious sound. It's like battle's going to take place, and because they have ethics, it's not like just start now. They wait until the time's right. And so, Arjuna at that point, seeing all these people and seeing the destruction that was going to occur, he said to Krishna, nothing good can come from this. It's like, what good can come from killing my relatives and, all different family members and, people in general? What good can possibly come from this? So many people will die, there'll be women will be widowed, and, basically the society is just going to go to ruin. There won't be all those people to help take care of society and engage in welfare activities and everything. So, he was putting forward ideas and arguments to Krishna, like, this is just, I just don't want to do this, and it describes basically that, the people who are on this battlefield, they're like incredibly powerful warriors, like this is what they're trained from childhood. And it's like people have certain characteristics, it wasn't like somebody, nowadays you can get, or not so much now, but when I was growing up, the Vietnam War was on, and, all sorts of people would be enlisted, whether they were, a military type person or not. You could be a bank clerk, and, there you've been conscripted to go off to war. It's like those kind of people aren't meant to fight. There's certain type of people that want to protect, and they've got the body for it, they've got the mentality for it, So you've got these, very strong and heroic people that are about to engage in this battle. And so Krishna was saying, Arjuna, basically what happens is you get to hear about this incredibly powerful warrior who's going to have a nervous breakdown right now. So, many of us come to situations in our lives where, we just crumble, it's like, it can be something just so heavy, or, it can be a death of a loved one, or like a tragic accident, or, maybe just, a whole bunch of things happen, and you just, you barely can stand, you just feel sickened, you can't think straight, your life's just, falling apart. I don't know how many of you have been in that situation yet, but basically we'll all come into that point we will all come to that point if we don't become wise, right? There's nothing wrong with having a nervous breakdown. It can be an amazing door to a new life, to a spiritual life, right? You know what I mean? Like sometimes we have to be really knocked down before we start to go, jeepers. What is this world all about? Why am I here? What is this for? Is there some meaning and purpose to all this? It's like it just, do you know what I mean? It's like, we can just cruise on the surface until something big happens, and crisis, right? A big crisis, And so what happened, Arjuna said, "O infallible one, Krishna, please draw my chariot between the two armies so that I may see who is present here, who is desirous of fighting, and with whom I must contend in this great battle attempt. Let me see those who have come here to fight, wishing to please the evil-minded Dhritarashtra." That actually, when the boys were younger, they'd made this house for them and invited them to go live in it, but they made it out of shellac and they set it alight. But they'd already heard about something was going to happen, and they made a tunnel underneath and escaped. There's Dhritarashtra and his Duryodhana, tried to poison them. It just tried all these horrendous things, right? So, evil-minded is my old term. Right? Sanjaya said, thus being addressed by Arjuna, Lord Krishna drew up the fine chariot in the midst of the armies of both parties. In the presence of all the chieftains of the world, the Lord said, just behold, Arjuna, all the Kurus, the family members who are assembled here. There Arjuna could see, within the midst of the armies of both parties, his fathers, grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, friends, and also his father-in-law and well-wishers, all present there. When Arjuna saw all these different grades of friends and relatives, he became overwhelmed with compassion and spoke thus. My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up. So I don't know if, maybe you have to do some public speaking. First thing that happens, right, your mouth dries up. You freak out, right? Let alone something super heavy. Your mouth will dry up, right? My whole body is trembling and my hair is standing on end. There's two reasons that a person's hair will stand on end. One is intense ecstasy and the other is intense fear, right? My bow is slipping from my hand and my skin is burning. I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. So we all have experienced that, right? When something's traumatic, something's really disturbing you, you can't think straight, right? Just like your mind's reeling, it's just like so much going on and you can't decipher what it is. It's just like, you don't even know what to think, it's just like, amazing, right? I'm forgetting myself, my mind is reeling, I foresee only evil. I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsmen in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom or happiness. O Govinda, Krishna, of what avail to us a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed in this battlefield? When teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-laws, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and all relatives are ready to give up their lives and property and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, although I may survive? O maintainer of all creatures, Supreme Person maintains all living entities. I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. So when we talk about the three worlds, in this material world, we're very earth conscious, right? We're very Adelaide conscious, we're very our little world conscious, right? But there's different planetary systems. So there's higher planetary systems and there's lower planetary systems, and with different grades of living entities living in them. So it's when he talks about the three worlds, he's talking about the upper, this is called the middle planets, the earthly type planets, and then there's lower planets, right? There's not just this planet with living beings on it. So I'm not prepared to, even for all the planets, I'm not interested in this battle, I'm not interested in winning it, right? And so he went on to explain why he didn't think it was a good idea, right? So he's trying to tell Krishna, that although these men overtaken by greed see no fault in killing one's own family or quarreling with friends, why should we, with knowledge of the sins, engage in these acts? And I won't read on because there's a lot, but
Arjuna described all different reasons why he thought that they shouldn't fight. And then he said, having spoken thus, on the battlefield he cast aside his bow and arrow and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. And so then at that point, like he's saying, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to do this ghastly thing. I can't see how any good will come of it. And so the reason that Krishna has spoken the Bhagavad Gita and ultimately arranged such a monumental battle was to be able to rid the world of so many unscrupulous kings that didn't care about the people, who were just there to exploit them and get taxes and create so much wealth and prestige and for themselves. They weren't interested in the protection of society. And the society, if a saintly king runs society, runs the world, then they will make it so it's peaceful and harmonious for all the people, so that we can live our lives here in a way that's conducive for our spiritual growth, so that if everything's fairly peaceful around, then you can make spiritual progress. You're not disturbed by all these different things happening. It's kind of like, oh my God, you get sidetracked with that, and this is happening in my life, and the job and the this, and you know what I mean. There's so many different things happen, and it's very hard for us to just stay straight on a spiritual path, without just getting overwhelmed by different things that are going on. And so, this situation has been arranged so that we can all learn what to do when we're in the heaviest possible situation. When there's calamities around us, when our life has just become too hard to bear, what do we do? And instead of throwing down, our weapons and go, I'm not going to fight. I'm a military guy. They can kill me. He said, I'm going to walk off. I'm going to go to the forest. They can kill me unarmed and unresisting. I just don't want to do this. And he's the guy who's leading the whole military attack on the other side, right? And he's going, I'm out of here, just like everybody's like, what? How can you do that? They were just leaving us wide open to the attack of these evil-minded people, And so, and then at that point, he says, Krishna, I don't know what to do. He's already said, I'm not going to do it. and then he says, I don't know what to do. Please tell me, please instruct me. So it goes from being, like a friendly kind of conversation to, I'm lost. I've got no idea how to deal with this. It's just too overwhelming. What do I do? So my spiritual teacher described that we'll all come to that point. We all come to the point of needing help. We need protection. We're not self-sufficient. We're not all powerful. We don't have all the answers. And so then we go to the Bhagavad Gita when we're distressed and go, help, what do I do? And so then Krishna, chapter 2, we will go on to next week, is like a summary of the whole Bhagavad Gita and describing about who we are, where we fit in the world, what our duties are. So it's like a summary. And so that we can actually, once we begin to understand more about the Bhagavad Gita, we can understand how it applies to us in our daily life and how we can make our life full of meaning and purpose. Because if we're just living our lives like, society says to do, just like go to work, make some money, buy lots of goodies, and you're going to be happy, and everything's going to be fine. And we experience I'm not fulfilled by doing those kind of things, and my work doesn't satisfy me, and I'm just really a bit lost here about what direction to take, And so that's what the Bhagavad Gita is for. It's to give us direction in our life so that we can
have a really simple path to follow to enlightenment. That's actually what it's about, to make it so that we can become happy and satisfied, we can understand our true nature, and when the different things happen to us or around us, we're able to not get touched by it, right? We can have a clarity. Now, Arjuna's saying, like his mind's reeling, I don't know what to do, So we want to be able to have the clarity to know what to do in each situation that we find ourselves. So that's what Bhagavad Gita is for, to enlighten us on our path to spiritual perfection. Thank you. Bhagavad Gita, I mentioned earlier, was written in Sanskrit, and then it's translated into English by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And Sanskrit is quite a phenomenal kind of language. It's where other languages come from. And so different words can have different meanings according to the way they're positioned into a sentence, which is pretty much like every language, right? And so we need someone to, when it's translated into English, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami put the original verse in Sanskrit, and then he put the verse in, with what the word is in Sanskrit and what the English word is, So that's there. And then he has it in English, and then the explanation of that verse. And so, we need a translator because it's in Sanskrit. And there's many different Bhagavad Gitas that we study the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who translated into English. And he called it Bhagavad Gita as it is because he's not interpreting what Krishna says. This is what Krishna says, and then it's up to us to try and understand that, but not go, well, I think he meant this, well, it could be interpreted to be like this, or Krishna. So I saw something the other day, and it was a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, and someone interpreted it because it talks about us, the self within the body, and it talks about the Supreme Self with a capital S, and that's not us, right? We're not the Supreme Soul, right? But there's a Supreme Being, a Supreme Self within our body. And so the person interpreted it that, I am the self within the body, and once the illusion's covered, I am the Supreme Self. It was like, I wouldn't be this, I wouldn't be able to be covered by illusion if I was the Supreme Being, right? So that's why we follow the Bhagavad Gita as it is, because Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami is accepting Lord Krishna as the original speaker, the original personality of Godhead. And when he speaks, he's perfectly capable of saying what he wants to say, and we don't have to go, well, I think he actually meant this. I think he didn't mean that he's God. I think he meant that we're all God. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So
the purport is also from Bhagavad Gita. It's not.
The purport is Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami explaining that verse.
Okay, so it's Bhagavad Gita itself. It's not like English translator or interpreter who put that to explain the verses.
The purport is by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami explaining the verse. Yep. Because when we have the verse by itself, it's like maybe, I'm not sure. Right. And so he explains, but he doesn't change the meaning. Yeah. And so when we read Bhagavad Gita or any Vedic text, and when we hear it from someone, like I'm speaking, right? You need to take that into your heart and go, well, this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense, or I'm not sure about this, and you can check with the other great spiritual teachers, is this in harmony with what they've taught, or is this person making up their own trip, or do you see what I mean? It's like we have to be careful. So the Vedic system is that we have a four-way checking system. We don't just go on, well, the person's got a lot of charisma, or they're, the amazing kind of person, and they've got a lot of followers, or they look really spiritual, or whatever it might be, right? It's like
we try and find a bona fide teacher, we hear from them, and then we check what they're saying with scripture. We check it with the past saintly people, see if it harmonizes what they've taught, and we check it with God within our heart. So we must always check whatever we hear, because we don't want to be misled, right? Our life's at stake. You know, we want to have a happy, meaningful, purposeful life, right? We want to have a successful life. We don't want to reincarnate and go through this thing all over again and again, right? So it's like it's important that we're careful and we, you know, be careful who we hear from.
So Krishna advised Arjuna to fight because
Yes.
he's the fighter. That was contradictory for me, because
Yes.
I think being humble and walking away from the battlefield is a logical answer to me.
Yeah.
So what is your view on that?
One way to try and understand it from our kind of platform is that if you've got a house somewhere, thank you, and somebody comes along and they decide that's their house and you have to get out and they're going to live there now, and you just go, oh, okay, and walk off, right? I don't want to cause any disturbance. You guys have got a few acres, right? You know, you could go, well, you could have some part of it, and then they go, no, you're not allowed to stay here. We're not going to give you. You can't even. You're not even allowed a corner of your own property, right? Thank you very much. Yeah. Do you understand what I mean? You like we're not. You know, it'll be like, okay. China comes in here and goes, okay, we're taking over. And you go, okay. We're not going to, right? You know, we will try every diplomatic way that we can, but there's certain types of people who will try every diplomatic way they possibly can to make it so that it can be resolved peacefully, but ultimately we have armies to protect us from people invading. And so it does go against everybody's grain when they first hear about Bhagavad Gita. It's like, what? The spiritual book and it's about a fight? You know, it's like, oh, I don't get this. I thought we were supposed to be like, you know, tolerant and peaceful, loving. But a person can fight without hate. You know, you can fight for principles. Like if you started walking home and someone's beating up a dog, you may grab that person and try and get him away if they wouldn't listen to you, say, no, don't do that. And, you know, you'll use a bit of violence to get them off, right? To try and protect someone who's innocent. It's just, you know, what has to be done. You know, there are always going to be evil people, and we can try our absolute best not to have a fight. But sometimes they're just going for it. You know, they're just going to have a fight. They're going to, you know, and so you try and do what needs to be done to protect everybody, to protect all the citizens, without hating that person. Just understanding that that person is really misguided. You know, they really lost the path. You know, they become so full of greed and not seeing each person as a spirit soul who's got a right to live and a right to have their own property, you know, that I don't have a right to go and take somebody's stuff, you know. There's always going to be people who don't see that at all, you know. And so, you know, we can try and educate, but there'll always be people who don't want to be educated. You know. A friend was saying that the other day. They got a 4-year-old, and they were trying to explain why they had to do something. And they said, "Do you understand?" He said, "I don't want to understand."
Does it also boil down to a duty?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Like if I'm
Yes.
a father and I've got a son and somebody started beating up my son, then I'm going to stop them
Absolutely.
straight away, whatever
Yes.
it takes.
That's right. Yes, we have a duty, and that was Arjuna's duty, is to protect the innocent people from these unscrupulous rulers that are going to exploit. That's absolutely what's contained in Bhagavad Gita is duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a bit late.
But if you extend it further to political scale, I'm sure that Chinese government thinks that, I mean, I'm not going down that path, but
Thank you so
they're
much.
sure that it's their duty, right, to come over and take something. So, or we take, say, Russia, right, or
Yes.
whoever.
Yes.
So,
Or Ukraine.
Yeah, yes, that's right. So, I mean, certainly everyone thinks that they have a right and they have a duty to expand themselves, or, I don't know, fight for their children. So
Yeah.
it's very tricky, grey area, I think. It's all subjective, because it assumes that you have a universal knowledge of what is good and what is bad, if you are able to judge, right? So you say, I'm fighting for the right purpose. But if you look from a different angle.
Yes, exactly. And so, yes, so what the situation is that Krishna is the supreme person, and he has the overview of what he wants happening for the good of the whole of society. Forever, he wants to have pious rulers who are actually going to take care of the citizens. And so he's the person who's saying, we've done everything we can, and this battle's going to take place. And you're a warrior, that's your duty, is to perform that, So, yeah. There's wars, pardon?
Is that why Krishna is there?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
It's greater than
Yes, so there's a bigger purpose behind it, whereas